cloud code, as we're calling it at the moment, has been made possible by these sponsors that you can see on the screen behind us. Now, the New Zealand Computer Society went out to the industry to ask for support to enable it to commence the project. And what we did is we did a sponsorship cap of $5,000. Now, no financial contributor that's listed up there has had any influence on the steering group, the project team, or the outcome of the Code of Practice. And that's due in part because we made sure that no one person could put in any more than $5,000, and there are other sponsorship levels as well. The other reason that we feel that the cloud code is representative of the market is because of the transparency that we've used throughout the whole process, and I'll give you some information about that as well. So, some background to the cloud code. Early in 2001, the New Zealand Computer Society was asked by a group of representatives of the cloud industry to facilitate the development of a code of practice for cloud computing in New Zealand. So New Zealand Computer Society broke this project up into two phases. The first was to look at the structure and the approach that the code should take, and that code needed to be industry-based, as we said, and representative of the industry, so we needed to engage industry to do that. So we took off on our little plane, and we went Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, did some workshops, work groups around the country, seeking people's opinions on how this code of practice should actually be developed. We then went back to all those participants, I think there was about 152 of them at that time, and we surveyed them with all the suggestions out of all the workshops that we did, and from that, the consensus that we received out of that survey went towards developing the structure and approach document that we put out. The second stage was to work with industry specialists to make sure that the content of the code was relevant to the industry, relevant to the time period, and actually correct. So over those two stages, as Andrew said before, we've engaged over 200 individuals from both local industry and customers, because we thought it was very important to ensure that customers were actually represented inside this code of practice. So one of the big questions, why do we need a code of practice for cloud computing in New Zealand? Well, the industry representatives that met early in 2011 felt that the reputation of the industry was being threatened by an apparent lack of standards for cloud computing in New Zealand. Further to that, there's also a general lack of understanding of accepted definitions of cloud computing, and that results in rogue providers out there providing services that fall short of generally acceptable practices. The purpose of the Cloud Code is to enable professional cloud service providers to benchmark and demonstrate their practices, processes and ethics via a recognised third party to build trust with prospective customers. The Cloud Code also assists end users by allowing them to make informed decisions based on the disclosure of the practices of the service provider, enabling the end users to gain comfort with the service provider's ability to meet their requirements. Can you tell there was a few typos in that little paragraph there? So, progress to date. As I said, we did workshops throughout the country through November and December, and these finished in December 2011. We followed that with a survey of participants, looking for the consensus of the suggestions that were brought forward. We then drafted the structure and approach document based on the survey responses, and we put that out for public consultation in January 2012. We then finalised the structure based on the feedback that was received. The next step was to ask for individuals who considered themselves as specialists in 16 different areas to help develop the content for the code. The resulting draft code was put out for public consultation in March, and the submissions closed in April. So while we're out and about, this is what we learned. We learned that 73% of participants favoured a self-assessment model, and a good portion of those supporting self-assessment also favoured an audit component of some kind, whether that be random, voluntary or compulsory. 87% of our participants supported a disclosure-based code of practice rather than a prescriptive one. Now, the terms of reference for the project said that the code had to be easily adoptable, and the majority obviously supporting a disclosure-based code of practice meant that the approach would be an easy one and easy for cloud providers to adopt. A large majority of the participants felt that the code should apply to all cloud providers, not just software as a service providers or infrastructure providers, but everybody who considered themselves to be providing a cloud product. Again, a majority of the participants supported the idea that required disclosure statements being made available. So when it came to the areas of disclosure, these were the most favoured ones, the ones up on screen. And security there being at the bottom of the list was obviously high on our topics of conversation around the cloud code. So the next steps. The final code has actually been written, edited and been submitted. We are just waiting, literally waiting on the printer to deliver the cloud document to us here today. The next steps after today are to complete the framework for the assessment of cloud providers. We need to develop a compliance mark so that the service providers that are compliant under this code can display that. And we need to develop a maintenance program for the code. Now, by maintenance, we mean a regular review of the code, the appropriateness of the disclosures, and how it's affecting the market. We also need to devise a whole pile of marketing material for both the service providers and the consumers, including a schedule of recognised security standards, and I'll talk about security a little bit later on. Now, the marketing material for consumers is going to be based on plain English explanations of questions they should be asking their service providers when engaging them, but also what each of the disclosures inside the Code of Practice actually mean and how they relate to their businesses. So the intended launch date for the code is 30th of July, and I'll talk to you soon about the differences between releasing the cloud code today and launching it at the end of July. Key elements of the code. It is a disclosure-based voluntary code of practice. Now, one of the things in the terms of reference for this project was to ensure that it was a voluntary code of practice. The preference was for disclosure-based code, and that was also supported by the survey that we went out there. Obviously, 87% wanted it disclosure-based as well. The code carries a minimum security requirement of CSA's STAR registry. The service providers that sign up to this code of practice will be allowed to display their security certifications, whether they're ISOs or anything like that. They don't have to have STAR registry. That is just the absolute minimum that you must have. And the code includes disclosures around ownership, location and access of data, backup and maintenance, geographic diversity, SLAs and support, data transportability and formats, and jurisdictions. So, who does the code apply to? The code applies to businesses who offer remotely hosted IT services of any type, either to New Zealand or within New Zealand, that meet the definition of the cloud code. Please note that the slide up here actually says all or part of the definition, which is actually incorrect. Products and services which meet the definition in spirit and are generally considered a cloud offering but are precluded due to an arbitrary matter related to the definition that we're going to talk about soon will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Very formal wording, and I had to make sure I read it word for word. What it means is if you believe you are a cloud provider, you believe you are providing cloud services, but you don't meet the specific words in the definition, we can still help you out. So this definition. Definition is based on the NIST one. I'm sure you're all aware of NIST. We altered it slightly as per suggestions from all the workshops that we held late last year. So what we have for the purpose of the cloud code is an on-demand scalable resources which are provided as a service, such as networks, servers and applications. They're accessible by the end user and can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal effort or service provider interaction. Now, obviously, on reading that first time around, you might go, One of the examples is one of the people we engaged with said, look, I provide hardware as part of my cloud offering. Hardware doesn't meet the definition that's up there. That's okay. If you believe you are providing a cloud product, we can look at including that in the cloud code for you. One of the great things about the code being so young and so infantile, we get a lot of flexibility around how we apply it to the business and the industry, how we actually get it out there and who we talk to. But part of that maintenance program will be around re-looking at the definition for one, the disclosure statements for another, and how they apply to that market, how we can actually firm it up and make it solid. Disclosure statements. We're not asking you to disclose anything really long and lengthy, and nobody's going to have to write a 10-page essay for each disclosure statement. There's two examples up there for you. Most of the disclosure statements inside the code are a yes, no, or do not type option. You just select the appropriate answer and move on to the next one. Some of them, having a yes, no answer doesn't actually apply to it, like the backup one that we've got there. So all you need to do is put in the appropriate answer in the box. One of the key things we had to ensure while developing this was that it was easy, and we all know that business owners are incredibly busy and their tech teams are generally incredibly busy as well. So running through this document, circling the right thing, ticking the right box, or adding in a couple of words we felt was the easiest way for providers to approach this. Now going back to what if a disclosure inside the Code of Practices are relevant to your business, we understand that not all cloud providers are created equal, and that some of the disclosure statements won't actually apply to your business model or your products out there. So on a case-by-case basis, we're going to work with you to remove disclosure statements or amend them to make them relevant to your business. The application process, the fun part. Now this is what has been launched as of the 30th of July. We'll have the application process online so that service providers can apply via the web portal, put all the relevant disclosure answers in via the web portal, and that will then produce a disclosure statement for you. Once the disclosure statement has been finished, we will go through and check it and make sure that all the disclosures have been answered appropriately. Or taken out if they need to be. Once we have all the disclosure statements there, we intend to be able to display them on our website for consumers to come and have a look at. So the idea is there'll be a register there. Company A and Company B will be listed. If a consumer wants to look at one of the disclosure statements, they can click on any of the links and have them brought up. It means they don't have to go between the website and various cloud providers' disclosure statements and hunt for them. So once the disclosure statements have been checked, they will be added to the register. Obviously, disclosure statements will be put up at the same time. You'll also be sent the logo to display on your website and a link back to the Cloud Code website as well.
You mentioned that it takes 18 months from application to certification for the UK.
It took 18 months for the first 5.
First 5 took 18 months. How long do you anticipate it taking here? And you mentioned the cost as well. Do you have an idea of what the cost is going to be like here?
As far as costs, not as yet. We went through a process to try and figure out who was actually going to champion this code of practice. As part of the last submission process or formal feedback process, we asked in the submission document, who do you think should do it? The response favoured the New Zealand Computer Society to do it because we are independent. So what we're about to do now is embark on a cost discovery exercise, find out exactly how much this is going to cost the society to run, and the fees will be based on a cost basis. It's not something that the society specifically wants to make money out of. Obviously, we're here to advance the ICT section, so we're not looking at making that a business, but at the same point in time, we're not going to lose money over it either. How long it'll take to do this? I think if you had a spare half an hour, you should be able to go through and do it. It is really a matter of, assuming you've got one of the certifications, one of the security certifications, it should take you about half an hour to go through and make all the the appropriate responses to disclosure statements and hit the submit button.
So if a consumer has an issue with a provider whereby they believe that the provider has breached one of their declarations, is there a process for reconciliation?
We will be developing a disputes process to go alongside the code. What form or framework that takes, we don't know yet. That's part of the work to do in the next 2 months.
Since it's disclosure-based, what sort of oversight or monitoring is going on if a provider does have some sort of breach and doesn't adhere to those disclosures? How do you know what's going on?
Yeah, we initially are going to be sort of looking for public to tell us what's going on. We'll be keeping eyes out if somebody has a major breach. Under the New Zealand privacy law, you're actually supposed to inform the Privacy Commissioner, whom we work closely with, so there'll be an avenue there. That's one of the things that haven't been determined because it's up to the body that is managing the cloud code. And this process of handing to New Zealand Computer Society to run has only just happened in the last couple of weeks. That's something that hasn't been thought through yet, but definitely on the cards.